Ta-da! Welcome everyone, another episode of Dice and Brushes. I apologize for starting this video a little late. Just some personal things in my life have kind of delayed me recording this. So, real quick, we're just going to get into the issues 64 all the way through, what is this one, 67 of the Warhammer Imperium magazine. And let's ride right into this with the sprue for the Immortals and Deathmarks. So with this one, you are supposed to technically build this one with the Deathmarks, the snipers. I've already shown off this sprue before, so I'm not going to go in depth on it like I usually would. Alright, and with that out of the way, let's roll into the magazine itself. So we roll right into a little bit about the equipment and some backstory about the NECRON Deathmarks themselves. A little bit for if you're doing a campaign. Some lore on Watch Captain Artemis. And I forget about the other one of the chaplains that's in here. And how they basically kind of screw up Eldrad's plans for reawakening a certain Eldar avatar. Orton Cassius. I never remember him at all. He's not really seen on the tabletop, and technically, Watch Captain Artemis, he is but isn't. I think he's in Legends right now for his model and rules. I'll have to double check that. But then we got some good lore about the First Tyrannic War when the Imperium first found out about the Tyranids via High Fleet, I believe, Behemoth. Yes, High Fleet Behemoth. Basically wiping out the Ultramarines' first company. And of course, we're going to have how to build your Deathmarks, how to paint them with the paints that you have received within this magazine subscription. Then we have some of these are now old rules for Space Marines. There are 10th edition equivalents, but look on the Warhammer community website, go to Downloads, Warhammer 40,000, to get the actual rules for 10th edition. For example, combat squatting, which they show here, is no longer a thing. So, but infiltrating is just in a new method. There's now a universal special rule for that. And then some rules for the Necrons. Again, these rules are now outdated with 10th edition. So you will have to look for the Necrons index for the current rule set. So I'm not really going to go over them. And again, I'm not going to go over the Deathmark datasheet because there's a 10th edition one that's updated. And I'm not going to go over those rules. You can still play this mission. It's just that now you're going to have to start thinking about just using the stuff you've been given. Use the power level that these issues have been showing you on their data sheets. So for example, a squad of 5 Deathmarks is 4 power. If you're going to use this. Otherwise, there is some new chapter approved mission cards, or there's also a mission right out of the main rulebook. The rulebook itself and the indexes for the factions are all free on the Warhammer community website. This card deck, I believe, was about $30 at the local game store, but they have RIW Hobbies has a 25% discount. And so, without any further ado, we'll go into the next issue. All right, and now we got issue number 65. Ooh, let me try to get it better in frame there. This has 1, 2, 3, 4 Space Marine infiltrators 1 Eliminator, 1 Suppressor, and 1 Phobos Lieutenant with the rifle. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit more than I would. Oh, let's try to turn this light down. There we go. You should be able to see a little bit better. Just give you little by little of the sprue here so you can see what's going on. Hope that stays in relatively good focus. And these sprues that they're coming for the Phobos Marines are basically the sprues that came in what is now one of the older get started with Space Marines kits from 9th edition. The 10th edition one is from Leviathan. This is from the 9th edition. But let's go right into here. So of course, we got a little bit of info about the Lieutenant in the Phobos armor. Again, a lot of his rules has changed, but his war gear itself has not. So of course, just like before, you'll have a little bit for any kind of campaigns. A little bit of lore on Logan Grimnar. With the sheer amount of stuff that this guy does, this barely covers anything. So if you're a Space Wolves fan, by all means, go in depth, go wild. Ragnar Blackmane, he is most famous now for not really killing, but cutting off Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka's head. And that, ironically, but he got very badly hurt at the same time, which forced him to cross the Rubicon Primaris, and Mechs basically made Ghazghkull the size of a small tank now. So, ironically, that fight that almost killed them both made them stronger. The Orc way. Alright, then we go a little bit. It says Space Marine vehicles, but it's mainly focused on the Redemptor Dreadnought. It covers a little bit about the impulsor, repulsor chassis, etc. But big bit is on their dreadnoughts. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Invictor Tactical Warsuits. Not only do they fit my personal army theme for Space Marines, but they also have a good volume of fire. And of course, we got more of how to build your Space Marines. Keep in mind, these are different models of what would be within the same unit. Different parts will go for different individual models. So if you were to try to cut out just all the eliminators, put them in a bag, for example, and then come back to them at a later date, it might be a little more difficult to assemble them from that pile. Same with the suppressors and the infiltrators. Certain parts only go with certain parts right now. So again, this one is for the guy that's throwing the smoke. Let's see, where's the... Oh, here's the sergeant. Sergeants are typically shown as being on a tactical rock with their foot or something similar. The lieutenant has his own rock. But sometimes I will use, like for my incursors, I had to convert them from infiltrators, and I'm just using the guy with the smoke grenade as the sergeant for them. Of course, how to paint them. And you will be getting even more paint later on. So I'm not going to go too in depth. They do tell you about how to fix some errors. Be very careful about painting the Medicae's satchel, the Helix Adept. White is a pain in the butt. They tell you to start out with the Corax White. Instead, I would advise you to start off with a Dawnstone and then build up to the Corax White and then follow their normal steps. White is simply easier to paint when you start from a gray. Of course, again, we have the what is now an outdated 9th edition data sheet for the Lieutenant and Phobos armor. Look to the Warhammer community website with the free index for his new rules. Alright, then we got, of course, breaking the seals at 50 power. Again, use the power levels that they show you on the data sheets. If you want to use the new rules, use the new rules. If you want to continue using the rules that were just given to you within this magazine, go for it. Just depends on what you and what your opponent would like to do. Alright. Then, of course, as not quite an attachment, but right on the back, we have a nice multi-page pullout for a little bit about NECRONs. And for Warzone, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. A little bit about Dolmen Gates, Necron Tomb World Networks. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Zarakan, I think, Elite. And probably the easiest parts to remember. The Scions of Gilman, the Ultramarines, a little lore about them fighting Necrons. A little bit of lore about Gilman himself, about some of their fire support, but nothing too big in here. Personally, I think this is much better for the Necron lore, just given the sheer amount. If you're really into certain war zones, go for it. If you're more interested in the individual lore of different units, different war gear, this is not going to be as good for those purposes. But it does go over quite a bit about what the Silent King has to do within this war zone. So it's not like he's totally silent. Alright, now we're burning right through things today. So this is now issue number 66. Much like the order that you must execute, this has 3 infiltrators, 1 suppressor, and 1 eliminator. Make sure I can get as much of this sprue, let's tilt it this way, as possible. So you can see very well. Unfortunately, this sprue does not, or these sprues rather, only have the infiltrators. They do not have the option to make them the incursors at all. Oops, let's go over here. So that is another sprue for Brett that I'll put to the side for him. And then let's go a little bit on number 66. So we got a little bit more about the suppressors now. These are in a weird spot in the meta for what their role is and what their rules are. But in essence, you shoot a target, they can't fire Overwatch. If you have a assault-based army, that is fantastic, especially if you're fighting something with flamers. Their accelerator autocannon is good against medium to heavy infantry and light vehicles as well. Of course, we got a little battle record section. We have more lore on the eliminators. A little bit about their bolts, sniper rifles, their camo cloaks, some other stuff that really doesn't matter in game. Their bolt sniper rifles did unfortunately take a hit in the essence that in 9th edition they had 3 different ammunition types that they could choose from. Now they only have 1 sniper round. They lost their hyperfrag and they lost another round that I forget the name of. You can still use a las fusel, which is kind of like a fusion between a las cannon and a sniper rifle. That's the best way I can describe it. Unfortunately, las fusils are not included in the sprue, so you are stuck with the bolt sniper rifles. And of course, if you got a campaign going, now we got lore about the Second Tyrannic War. Excuse me. this time it was High Fleet, I believe, Kraken? Yeah, that's Kraken. So, a little bit about the battle for Icar 4. This is where Marnius Calgar, I think this is where he ripped the head off a Swarmlord. Doom of Eandon. This is where the craft world of Eandon, the yellow and blue, was pretty much overrun, and even the Avatar of Cain, I think, was defeated by a Swarmlord. But they still had some help from their Ghost Warriors, and they have another character that's got the Spear of Twilight that helped rescue them and actually killed the Swarmlord. But that's for another time. We got a little bit of background for the Chaos Knights. So, Imperial Knights are not quite Titans. They're too small, and Chaos Knights are just, well, the Chaos version of them. They fall into Chaos. A little bit about trader houses, including some of their heraldry. Then we go over to some lore about Darnith Lysander. It says he's Watch Commander of the Phalanx. He's the chapter master of the Imperial Fists. I'm sorry, captain of the first company. We just typically call him something else. Let's see. Oh yes, the Vortex Grenades. You will never see these in-game, as far as I'm aware. It gives you a little bit of lore, but basically, Terminators used to carry them to destroy enemy Titans. They'd basically throw it, and it'd basically open up a hole in the warp, which weirdly enough created kind of like this tornado of warp energy that would go in random directions, destroying everything in its path, so it could hurt you as much as the enemy. So there's only a few of them in the lore at the moment, and so you just don't really see them in game. We have Tor Garadon. He is a Primaris captain of, I believe, the third company? Yeah, he's got the red on the shoulder pads. Third company of the Imperial Fists. He is Primaris, whereas Darnith Lysander, the Terminator with a great Thunderhammer and Storm Shield, is Firstborn. Got a little bit about the chapter relic, the Hand of Defiance. It's basically his power fist. We have a short story that is called City of Death. This is a halfway decent story about the Genestealer cult rising up against the Imperial Guard. If you're into either of them, this is actually a very good read. I'm not a particular fan, so it does not hold as much interest to me. Of course, how to build Vanguard Space Marines. Again, there was a start collecting set with all this stuff, so that's where these models come from. They're basically the stuff that didn't sell from there. How to build them, and what they should all look like. Space Marine rules, Angels of Death Part 2. Again, unfortunately, these are outdated. If you're playing 9th edition rules, go and play them as is. If you are playing, if you're playing 10th edition, these aren't used anymore. Furthermore, the combat not the combat doctrines. I'm sorry. These doctrines, the Devastator, Tactical, and Assault, these were FAQ'd near the end of 9th edition, or I should say in a balanced data slate, so that while you do have to start in Devastator, then move to Tactical, and then Assault, you don't have to. You can, rather than going for Devastator turn 1 and then having to go to Tactical turn 2, possibly 3 if you want to, and then having to go to Assault Doctrine by turn 4, 3 at the earliest. Now you can just choose to stay in Devastator, or once you get Tactical, choose to stay in Tactical Doctrine via the balanced data slate for 9th edition. 10th edition, these are very different now. And of course, gives you a tutorial for the old style, the original doctrines, and how they used to work. And of course, we got a little bit for a mission. This one is Necrons versus any Imperium. This one is set up pretty nicely, nice and even, pretty standardized. Nothing remarkable to say there. And with that, we will get to issue 67. Okay, now we have the final issue of the episode, number 67. This one comes with, let's see if I can get this, White Scar and Tesseract Glow. Oops, tried to get that. There we go. These are a great combination to use on the glowy bits of all the Necrons. And let's just get right into 67 here. A little bit of lore of the Silver Templars Space Marine chapter. They're not particularly big, although they are part of the Ultima founding from the, I believe they're from the Space Marines, or not from the Ultramarines. Blech. They are Space Marines. I think they're descended from the Ultramarines, though. But they don't play too big a role compared to some of the other chapters, so I don't get into them too much. But if you want to, go ahead. You can pause the video a little bit. Here, let's actually get this closer to you so you can pause the video. Yeah, let's get there. And maybe you can read it from me. So if you're interested, go right ahead. Otherwise, we go over to the newer battle tanks of the Primaris Space Marines. So right now, it used to be that anti-grav technology was very rare for the Imperium, and it wasn't quite heresy, but it was thought of as being a little advanced, and they didn't like that. So it wasn't until Belisarius' call that these things became now pretty prevalent, at least within the within the Primaris sections. You got the Repulsor, which is a combination of battle tank and, well, I should say heavy battle tank and transport. We have the Repulsor Executioners, which is all big battle tank. We have the Impulsors, which are they're just APC. They got some decent firepower if you equip them to do so. But otherwise, they're still mainly just a transport. Using the same chassis, we have the Gladiators, more dedicated anti-tank. Well, I shouldn't say just anti-tank. They are the more dedicated tanks. These ones do not transport as far as I am aware. Some of them have Laz and Melta. One of them just has a big gun up top. And one variant, the Reaper, is all about anti-infantry. So go ahead and build whatever variant you feel is best for your army. We have a bit about Commander Dante. With the sheer amount of stuff Dante has done, this amount of lore it doesn't even scratch the surface. He's over 1,000 years old. I think he's over 1,100 now. But anyway, he's the oldest Space Marine currently alive in his original form. So, with the exception of a few dreadnoughts, he is the oldest Space Marine currently active. He has been serving the Imperium for longer than the Primarchs. That is how long he has been in service. He does have the death mask of his Primarch, Sanguinius. He wears that to battle. we got Mephiston, the Lord of Death. He does have the Primaris version of himself now. Actually, I forget if I know Dante recently got a new model, but I don't know if it's a Primaris model or not. Could just be an upsizing. But Mephiston, I know for sure, did cross the Rubicon Primaris. I just forget about Dante. He has a semi-interesting backstory of succumbing to the Black Rage, and then not succumbing to it, but conquering it. And so this is all gives him a lot of power. He's supposed to be I did just want to add before we go in the Imperium to boot. Originally, if you are a subscriber to the How to Paint, you may have gotten with the Tesseract email saying that this was long story short. Premium use the two paints, the white scar. Lay that down first. I have contacted and then go over it with the Tesseract. The company. It turns out that was all the glowy effects. The next. It looks pretty good. The next pack is the one that will have the Orcs Premium again. Set. They show you how you can combine it. Some Gretchen, and a Run Third. I'm not a particular fan. A big mech with like shock attack gun. I should go back. If you, but I just want people to not feel like, hey, I'm missed out on something. These are going to build to something else, just like I thought I had missed something. That they have is with paints that they have not given premium pack yet. Is in the next, so it's going to look section with issues until they 68, give you 69 next and 70 set of paints. And with that, teach you how to paint. Tell everyone crystals. Get your shit painted. It's basically all the same thing. White scar and then Tesseract glow. Then they even show you how to use Tesseract glow for screens, how to use the white scar to kind of edge highlight shoulder symbols, cloaks, etc. But it can be simplified. Then the AdMech rules, holy orders. Let's see, this is, how do I say this? I'm not as familiar with the AdMech rules, especially the 9th edition. So I can't say if these are particularly good or bad. I can only tell you that all these rules are basically null and void for 10th edition. If you're using 9th edition rules, go ahead as they print out. 10th edition, it's no longer a thing. All right, so go over just how there's just too much here to talk about, especially to keep the video short. But let's go over a little bit of tutorial of how predicted barrage works, enhanced biomechanical interface. Again, if you're using 10th edition rules, these are not a thing. But if you're using 9th, you should be good. Auspex Array, another mission catered towards 9th edition, not the current 10th edition rule set. And that will be it. So this is all we've done with this part. I did just want to add before we left. Originally, if you are a subscriber, you may have gotten a email saying that this was supposed to be premium pack number 4 with the orcs. I have contacted the company. It turns out that was wrong. The next pack is the one that will have the orcs premium set. So it'll have a few boys, some Gretchen, and a Run Third, and a big mech with shock attack gun. But I just want people to not feel like, hey, I'm missed out on something. What's going on? Just like I thought I had missed something. No, that is the Orc Premium Pack is in the next section with issues 68, 69, and 70. And with that, I just want to tell everyone, get your shit painted.